Have you ever found yourself stuck in a cycle of self-criticism when anxiety strikes? The more you fight it, the worse it gets. But what if there's a way out? A simple yet transformative practice that could help you break free from anxiety and self-blame. In today's video, we're diving into a Buddhist concept that's more relevant than ever: self-compassion. It's not about excusing yourself or avoiding challenges. It's about embracing your flaws and anxieties with kindness, allowing yourself to heal. Let's explore how this powerful practice can help you navigate through anxiety and find true peace. Anxiety, as understood through the lens of Buddhism, originates from our attachment to various aspects of life, whether it's people, possessions, or even abstract concepts like success and status. Attachment in this context is not simply about the things we hold dear, but the emotional investment and the fear of losing them that come with it. The Buddha's teachings emphasize that suffering, including anxiety, arises from this very attachment, and that in order to overcome anxiety, we must learn to let go of the emotional dependency on these attachments. A common misconception in modern life is that anxiety is a response to external circumstances. However, Buddhism teaches that it is, in fact, an internal reaction to how we relate to the world. This realization is key to understanding how to break free from the cycle of anxiety. Instead of constantly fighting against the external world or trying to control it, we are taught to shift our focus inward, addressing the attachments that cause emotional turmoil. For example, consider someone like Elon Musk, who is often in the spotlight and whose identity has been tightly linked to his various ventures like Tesla and SpaceX. Musk's attachment to his company's success, his public image, and even his ability to maintain control over his enterprises could easily create anxiety, especially in the face of challenges or setbacks. However, by understanding and practicing non-attachment, he could begin to detach his sense of self from the outcomes of his ventures, and instead focus on doing his best in the present moment. This would enable him to reduce the pressure of anxiety that comes from feeling that his worth is tied to his company's performance. The Buddha taught that suffering is a natural part of life, but this suffering doesn't have to control us. Our relationship with suffering can be transformed if we understand that it comes from the attachments we hold. When we become attached to the idea of success, wealth, or relationships, we create an internal dependency on those things to feel happy or secure. The moment we experience a setback or the fear of losing what we value, anxiety creeps in, making us believe that our happiness is in jeopardy. A personal example can help clarify this concept. A friend of mine was constantly worried about losing his job. His attachment to the idea of job security was so strong that even a minor hiccup, such as a difficult conversation with his boss, would send him into a spiral of anxiety. He began to lose sleep, struggled to focus, and even doubted his self-worth. But after learning about non-attachment through Buddhist teachings, he had an epiphany. His identity and happiness were not bound to his job. Once he released the emotional grip he had on the idea of job security, his anxiety about work diminished. The fear of loss no longer had the same control over him. This story exemplifies one of the most important teachings in Buddhism. Attachment creates anxiety, and the only way to release that anxiety is to detach ourselves from the things we are overly attached to. Non-attachment doesn't mean that we stop caring about people, work, or our goals. It simply means that we don't cling to these things as the source of our happiness or self-worth. It's about understanding that everything in life is temporary. Our jobs, our relationships, our possessions, and learning to enjoy and appreciate them without the fear of losing them. Key takeaway: the Buddha's teachings on attachment and anxiety point to a crucial insight. Anxiety is not something that is caused by external factors, but rather by our internal attachment to outcomes. When we learn to live without attachment, whether it be to success, relationships, or possessions, we begin to experience a deeper sense of peace and freedom. This shift in perspective allows us to navigate life without the constant burden of anxiety and worry. In essence, Buddhism challenges us to reframe how we view our experiences and encourages us to embrace the idea that we can achieve true peace by releasing the attachment that holds us hostage to our fears and desires. This isn't just a theoretical concept. It's a practical approach to living a more peaceful and fulfilling life. Letting go of the need to control and holding on to the moment is a liberating act that allows us to experience life in a richer and more meaningful way. The Buddha's teaching of impermanence is one of the most profound and liberating principles in Buddhism. It emphasizes the truth that everything in life is transient. Our emotions, thoughts, relationships, and material possessions are all temporary. Yet, as humans, we often resist this truth, holding on to the illusion that things are permanent. This belief fuels our anxiety and suffering as we desperately try to hold on to things that are, by nature, always changing. Understanding impermanence and letting go the core of the Buddha's teaching on impermanence is simple. Everything changes. Our attachment to the idea that things will remain the same, whether it's our career, relationships, or even our own health, leads to anxiety. We place our happiness in things that are inherently unstable, and when those things change or are threatened, anxiety arises. For instance, take Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon. Over the years, Bezos has built an empire, but at every stage he's had to confront change, whether through market shifts, competition, or changes in consumer behavior. Even as Amazon became the global leader in e-commerce, Bezos understood the inevitability of change and impermanence. He adapted, focusing on growth while embracing the constant changes in the tech landscape. His ability to see change not as a threat, but as an opportunity for reinvention is a powerful example of embracing impermanence. In our personal lives, we often cling to the hope that things will stay the same, particularly with our relationships. We may believe that if we just work hard enough, we can control the course of our relationships or the stability of our finances. But the reality is that change is the only constant, and resisting it only causes suffering. Let's think about Oprah Winfrey, who has experienced significant transformations in her career and personal life. From being a news anchor to creating a global media empire, Oprah has faced continuous change. Early on, she learned the importance of accepting impermanence, which helped her adapt and thrive. Oprah has often spoken about the importance of resilience in the face of change, acknowledging that no phase of life lasts forever, and how embracing that truth empowered her to transform challenges into opportunities. The Buddha's teaching invites us to let go of the illusion that we can hold onto things forever. When we stop resisting change, we can begin to experience peace, as we are no longer fighting against the natural flow of life. Anxiety arises when we try to control the uncontrollable, holding on to a fleeting moment as though it will last forever. But by accepting impermanence, we stop fearing loss, because we understand that change is simply a part of life. The resistance to change and the birth of anxiety, one of the most common sources of anxiety, is our resistance to change. We fear the unknown, and we try to resist the natural ebb and flow of life. For example, consider the fear of aging. Many people spend their lives trying to avoid getting older, thinking that youth is the ultimate source of happiness. But as time passes, the inevitable reality of aging sets in. Resistance to this natural process can create immense anxiety as people fight against the changes happening in their bodies, their minds, and their environments. Take Brad Pitt as an example. As a well-known actor, he's experienced the inevitable passage of time and the public's obsession with his appearance. Yet, in recent interviews, Pitt has spoken about his acceptance of aging. He has learned to embrace the impermanence of his fame and appearance. His acceptance of change and his evolving understanding of his own identity reflect a deeper peace. Pitt's story demonstrates how one can move beyond anxiety about aging by accepting it and finding new ways to grow and evolve as a person, beyond just physical appearance. In Buddhism, the impermanence of our thoughts and emotions is a significant teaching. Anxiety often feeds on the belief that our feelings are permanent. We might feel overwhelmed with worry and think that these feelings will never go away. But as the Buddha teaches, our emotions, like the weather, are temporary. This recognition allows us to step back and observe our feelings without becoming overwhelmed by them. Anxiety does not define us. It is a passing moment, just like any other feeling. Take Beyoncé, who, despite being one of the most successful performers in the world, has shared her struggles with anxiety. Beyoncé, however, doesn't resist these feelings. Instead, she acknowledges them and lets them pass. She recognizes that anxiety is a temporary feeling and does not allow it to control her life or her performance. Her ability to accept her emotions without judgment or resistance is a powerful example of living in alignment with the Buddhist teaching of impermanence. A practical example: letting go of control in our everyday lives. Learning to embrace impermanence requires us to let go of the need to control everything. One story that comes to mind is that of a woman in her 60s, a mother who had long been anxious about her children's futures. She was deeply attached to the idea that she needed to guide and control her children's paths to ensure their success. Her constant worrying about their lives caused her immense anxiety. After coming across the Buddha's teaching on impermanence, she began to understand that while she could love and support her children, their future was ultimately beyond her control. This realization did not mean that she stopped caring about them, but rather, it allowed her to let go of the obsessive fear of their futures. She embraced the impermanence of life and allowed herself to live in peace, trusting that her children would grow and evolve in their own time, independent of her efforts. This story demonstrates how the fear of losing control leads to anxiety, and how embracing the truth of impermanence allows us to release that fear. When we stop trying to control the uncontrollable, we free ourselves from unnecessary worry. Letting go doesn't mean neglecting what we care about. It simply means recognizing that there is a natural flow to life that we cannot control, and learning to trust it. The Buddha's teaching on non-attachment is one of the most effective strategies for reducing anxiety. It is a concept that challenges our natural instincts, where we often find ourselves deeply emotionally connected to people, events, and possessions. In modern life, this attachment often leads to stress, frustration, and anxiety, as we hold tightly to things that are beyond our control. The Buddha's insight teaches that freedom from anxiety comes when we learn to release our emotional grip on these external factors. Non-attachment does not imply indifference or detachment from life. Instead, it is the ability to engage with life fully without allowing our emotions or circumstances to dictate our peace of mind. The concept of non-attachment is frequently misunderstood. Many people mistakenly think it means abandoning everything, leaving behind possessions, relationships, or responsibilities. However, non-attachment is not about neglecting the world or withdrawing from our connections. Instead, it is about experiencing life without the emotional clinging to things. When we practice non-attachment, we approach life with a sense of openness and flexibility, understanding that everything is impermanent and subject to change. One major component of non-attachment is learning to observe our emotions without getting caught up in them. In the case of anxiety, this means not identifying with the feeling itself. Anxiety is often viewed as something that consumes us, but through non-attachment, we can shift our perspective. Anxiety is just a feeling, one of many that we experience. It doesn't define who we are, nor does it need to control our actions or thoughts. Practical application of non-attachment anxiety, by its nature, is tied to future fears or past regrets. It thrives when we are unable to detach from these fears, believing that they define us or will dictate our future. Mindful observation is one powerful way to practice non-attachment and reduce the power anxiety has over us. The idea is simple. Instead of pushing away the anxious thoughts or battling against them, we simply observe them. We acknowledge their presence without judgment, without labeling them as good or bad. This process might sound counterintuitive. After all, we're often taught to fight anxiety, to try and suppress it or push it out of our minds. But the Buddha's teaching on non-attachment asks us to do the opposite. Instead of resisting, we observe. By doing so, we create a space between ourselves and the anxiety. We realize that anxiety is just a temporary state, not a permanent aspect of who we are. For example, imagine you're at work facing an overwhelming amount of tasks. Your mind races with thoughts like, what if I can't get everything done on time? Or, what if I make a mistake? In the past, these thoughts might have consumed you, leading to further anxiety and even paralysis. But with non-attachment, the practice becomes different. Instead of getting caught up in the anxiety, you pause, you take a deep breath. Instead of labeling the feeling as bad, you simply acknowledge it. I am feeling anxious right now. You observe the feeling without judgment. Over time, you begin to notice that the anxiety fades. It doesn't disappear immediately, but you no longer feel controlled by it. This practice of observing without judgment is a profound way of creating a mental distance between the feeling and our identity. The more you engage in mindful observation, the more you create a sense of detachment from the anxiety. You stop fighting the emotion, and by doing so, you reduce its hold on you. Real-world examples. High-profile figures using non-attachment to make the idea of non-attachment more relatable. Consider the example of Steve Jobs, the co-founder of Apple. Jobs was a visionary and a perfectionist who had a deep attachment to his work. But over time, he learned the power of letting go. Jobs was ousted from Apple, the company he built in 1985, and during that time, he could have easily been consumed by feelings of anger, resentment, or anxiety about his career. However, Jobs embraced the reality of change and impermanence. When he returned to Apple in 1997, he applied a new sense of non-attachment to his work. He was deeply invested in the vision of Apple, but he did not let the company's fate or the opinions of others define his happiness. His ability to detach from the pressure to control outcomes allowed him to innovate in ways that changed the tech industry forever. Another prominent figure is Barack Obama, who often speaks about his ability to maintain mental clarity in the face of public scrutiny. As the President of the United States, Obama faced constant pressure and criticism, and the weight of making critical decisions for the nation was immense. Yet, Obama spoke about how he practiced non-attachment, recognizing that he could not control everything or everyone. This approach allowed him to focus on the issues that mattered most, while accepting that the outcomes were beyond his sole control. Obama didn't fight the external pressures. Instead, he embraced the idea that he could only control his actions, not the reactions of others. This mental clarity, rooted in non-attachment, was crucial in his ability to make sound decisions during his presidency. These examples show that non-attachment doesn't mean abandoning ambition or responsibility. It means engaging with the world, being fully committed to our goals, while releasing the emotional grip on specific outcomes. Both Jobs and Obama understood that while they were deeply committed to their causes, they could not allow attachment to the results to cloud their peace of mind. Applying mindfulness in daily life. Mindfulness doesn't have to be confined to meditation practice. In fact, it can be integrated into nearly every moment of our daily lives. The key is to bring awareness to whatever we're doing, whether that's eating, walking, or working. Mindfulness in daily activities helps us stay connected to the present, preventing us from getting lost in anxious thoughts about the past or future. Take Barack Obama, for example. As the President of the United States, Obama faced immense pressure, constantly making high-stakes decisions and dealing with crises. Yet he often spoke about the importance of being present in the moment. He practiced mindfulness in the midst of his busy schedule, focusing on one task at a time. This approach helped him stay calm and make thoughtful decisions, even in moments of stress. For instance, while facing a critical decision about national security, Obama would often take a few moments to center himself, focusing on his breath and clearing his mind. This ability to stay present and avoid being overwhelmed by the pressure of the situation allowed him to make decisions with a clear mind, rather than being driven by anxiety or fear. Self-compassion is a core teaching in Buddhism that plays a vital role in overcoming anxiety. When we experience anxiety, it's easy to fall into the trap of self-criticism. We blame ourselves for feeling anxious, for not managing our emotions, or for not meeting our own standards. This cycle of self-blame exacerbates anxiety, making it more difficult to find peace. The Buddha taught that self-compassion is essential for healing, recognizing that anxiety is a natural part of the human experience. By practicing self-compassion, we create the space for healing and growth. The impact of self-criticism on anxiety. One of the most detrimental effects of anxiety is the tendency to criticize ourselves when we feel anxious. This inner critic tells us that we're weak, inadequate, or not handling situations well enough. It reinforces the very feelings that contribute to anxiety, creating a cycle that can feel impossible to break. Take Serena Williams, one of the greatest tennis players in history, as an example. Serena has spoken openly about her struggles with mental health, including anxiety, especially during high-pressure matches. Despite her extraordinary success, she still experiences self-doubt and pressure to perform. Early in her career, she often criticized herself after losses, believing that her anxiety and emotions made her less of an athlete. However, over time, she learned to treat herself with kindness and compassion. Instead of berating herself after a loss, she began to see her anxiety as part of the human experience and not a weakness. By practicing self-compassion, Serena was able to not only perform better but also achieve peace with herself, regardless of the outcome of any match. The power of self-compassion in reducing anxiety. Self-compassion is not about excusing our mistakes or avoiding responsibility, but rather about acknowledging that we, like everyone else, are fallible. The Buddha taught that we should treat ourselves with the same kindness and understanding that we would offer a friend who is struggling. When we are anxious or upset, instead of responding with self-judgment, we should respond with warmth and understanding. An example of this could be Emma Watson, who has shared her experiences with anxiety and self-doubt, particularly in relation to her public persona and career. Despite being a successful actress and activist, Watson often experiences the pressure of societal expectations. In the past, she would have been harsh on herself when feeling insecure, leading to even more anxiety. However, through practicing self-compassion, Watson learned to treat herself with the same kindness and care that she would offer others. She embraced the reality that anxiety is part of the human condition and allowed herself to feel without judgment. This shift in perspective helped her handle public scrutiny and anxiety with more grace, reducing the emotional burden she once carried. How self-compassion breaks the cycle of anxiety. The cycle of anxiety often worsens when we blame ourselves for feeling anxious. This self-blame can create a vicious cycle. Anxiety leads to self-criticism, and self-criticism leads to more anxiety. The key to breaking this cycle is to treat ourselves with compassion instead of judgment. When we begin to recognize that anxiety is a normal part of life, we stop internalizing it as a reflection of our worth or competence. Imagine a young woman named Claire who struggles with social anxiety. Every time she attends a social gathering, she feels her anxiety build. She worries about how others perceive her and often thinks she's making a fool of herself. Afterward, she berates herself, thinking she could have done better. This cycle of anxiety and self-criticism makes her fear future social situations. However, when Claire learned about self-compassion, she began to change her response to these moments. Instead of criticizing herself after social interactions, she started acknowledging her anxiety as something many people experience. She reminded herself that it's okay to feel uncomfortable sometimes, and that it doesn't mean she's failing. By practicing self-compassion, Claire found that her anxiety lessened over time, and she was able to participate in social events with more confidence and less fear of judgment. The role of self-compassion in healing self-compassion helps to create a safe space for emotional healing. When we are kind to ourselves, we allow the space for healing to occur naturally. Anxiety often arises from the fear of judgment, from others and from ourselves. When we show ourselves compassion, we create a space where we can acknowledge our feelings without judgment, allowing them to pass more easily. Take the example of Lady Gaga, who has been very vocal about her struggles with mental health. Despite her fame and success, she has faced significant anxiety, especially around her public image and personal struggles. Gaga has talked about how she used to be harsh on herself, thinking that her anxiety made her weak or unworthy. But by embracing self-compassion and seeking therapy, she learned to treat herself with kindness during moments of anxiety. This approach allowed her to heal and find more stability in her mental health, ultimately helping her perform and live her life with greater peace. The science behind self-compassion, there's also growing scientific evidence supporting the idea that self-compassion can significantly reduce anxiety. Research shows that people who practice self-compassion tend to have lower levels of stress and anxiety. This is because self-compassion helps us to regulate our emotions more effectively. When we are kind to ourselves, our body's stress response is less intense, and we recover more quickly from stressful situations. In contrast, self-criticism activates the stress response, making anxiety worse. When we criticize ourselves, our body enters a fight or flight state, increasing heart rate, blood pressure, and levels of stress hormones like cortisol. But self-compassion, by calming this response, helps to activate the body's relaxation response, reducing the physical symptoms of anxiety. Developing self-compassion, a step-by-step approach. 1. Acknowledge your anxiety. Instead of suppressing your anxiety, acknowledge it. Understand that it's a normal part of being human. Say to yourself, I'm feeling anxious right now and that's okay. 2. Speak kindly to yourself. When you feel anxious, replace harsh self-talk with words of comfort and care. For example, say to yourself, it's okay to feel anxious. I'm doing my best and that's enough. 3. Treat yourself like a friend. Imagine how you would respond if a friend were struggling with anxiety. You would likely offer them words of encouragement and kindness. Treat yourself in the same way. 4. Practice self-forgiveness. When you make mistakes, forgive yourself. Everyone experiences anxiety at times, and it doesn't mean you're weak or inadequate. Self-forgiveness is essential for healing. 5. Engage in self-care. Take time to nurture yourself physically and emotionally. This can include practices like meditation, exercise, journaling, or simply taking time to relax. Remember, the path to overcoming anxiety is not about eliminating it completely. It's about changing your relationship with it. By practicing self-compassion, we create space for healing, growth, and emotional resilience. Just like Serena Williams, Emma Watson, and Lady Gaga, who have shared their struggles with anxiety yet continue to thrive by treating themselves with kindness, you too can break free from the cycle of self-blame and criticism. As the Buddha taught, suffering is a part of life, but it doesn't have to define you. With self-compassion, you can face your challenges with clarity, strength, and peace. Let's embrace ourselves fully, imperfections and all, and start this journey toward a calmer, more compassionate life today.